These are the men who risked everything, men who sustained cities, industries, and families. Yet their names are rarely remembered. 7 professions that blended courage, desperation, and a strange form of pride. And today you'll learn about the 7 most dangerous occupations in ancient Australia. Get ready to hear stories that might explain why to this day, the Australian people so admire toughness and resilience. The chimney climbers. They were called steeplejacks, or tower monkeys. They slowly climbed thin ladders attached to small steel hooks driven into the masonry. One mistake, a loose knot, a loose brick, and their fall was complete. Imagine, 300 feet high, the wind roaring like a beast, the silence broken only by birds scurrying past. There were no safety ropes like today. The ladder each man carried was his own lifeline, made by his own hands. The wages were miserable, 7 or 9 pence an hour. But there was something about the work that appealed. The view from up there, the feeling of touching the sky, and perhaps the silent respect of the city below. Many of these men said the worst part wasn't the danger, but the loneliness. Up there, time seemed to stand still. Only the wind in your racing heart reminded you that you were still alive. The coal and gold miners. If climbers lived in the air, miners lived underground. Descending into dark tunnels, torches flickering, they knew that every crack in the rock could be the end. Coal burned their lungs, gold burned their dreams. There were stories of men who found a vein of gold one day and were buried the next. Many never saw their children grow up. In mining towns like Ballarat, Newcastle, or Broken Hill, the entire community revolved around these men. When an explosion occurred, it wasn't just one family that mourned, it was dozens. And the mine continued the next day, as if nothing had happened. In the Australian imagination, the miner became a symbol of struggle. Courageous, stubborn, willing to dig his own path even when it was costly. The eucalyptus lumberjacks, in the heart of the forests, the giants waited. They were trees 100, 200 feet tall, some older than any Australian city. Felling them was the task of men who worked with sweat, blood, and perfect calculation. A falling tree trunk, improperly measured, was a death sentence, and it wasn't uncommon. Men were crushed, arms were severed by out-of-control axes, saws broke. But there was also pride. Many lumberjacks said that each tree was like a defeated enemy, a battle that left its mark on their bodies. At the end of the day, their clothes drenched in sweat, their hands calloused, they would gather in campfires, telling stories by the light of the campfire. Some believed that the forest had a spirit of its own, and that those who disrespected it would pay with their lives. The pearl hunters up north in Broome, men dove into the warm waters in search of the hidden glow beneath. Without oxygen, only breath and courage. With each descent, their chests burned, their ears burst, and they feared they would never return. There were sharks. There were treacherous currents. But the greatest enemy was invisible: decompression sickness. Many returned to the surface only to die on dry land. Fun fact, most of the divers weren't Australian. They came from Japan, Malaysia, and the Pacific Islands. They worked like ocean slaves, but dreamed of the fortune of a single rare pearl. To those watching from the beach, they were heroes who defied the sea. But to their families, they were just husbands and sons who might never return. The railway builders. They crossed deserts and forests, laying rails to connect distant cities. The work was done under the scorching sun, with dynamite in their hands and little water to drink. Miscalculated explosions took entire lives in seconds. Bridges collapsed, railroad tracks gave way, and in the middle of nowhere there was no hospital, just red dust and silence. Still, there was a sense of mission. These men knew they were stitching the country together, that without them, Australia would remain divided, isolated. Every piece of track was a line of sacrifice, and to this day, the railways carry this ghost. Trains pass by, but beneath the tracks still lie the stories of those who never returned. Sailors and fishermen of the high seas, Australia has always lived on the ocean's edge, and the ocean has never been kind. Sailors braved storms that turned ships into fragile toys. Fishermen set sail at dawn and often never returned. The sea swallowed bodies unceremoniously, leaving only widows on the shore. But there was also poetry. Men who in the swaying waves claimed to hear the voice of home. Others swore the sea spoke, a warning before tragedy struck. In Australian memory, the seaman is both hero and ghost, someone who belongs more to the waves than to the land. The extreme groomers and ranchers. It may seem simple, shearing sheep, but in Australia's arid outback it meant endless hours, 100-degree heat, deep cuts from sharp blades, and the constant threat of snakes, wild horses, and absolute isolation. Some died of exhaustion, others went mad from loneliness, but these men sustained the wool empire, the wealth that put Australia on the world map. With each shearing, they didn't just cut wool. They also cut the skin from their own hands, their youth, and their peace. 7 professions. 7 ways to risk your life for a small salary and greater hope. Each of them left its mark. In the chimneys that still touch the sky. In the abandoned mines, in the silent forests, in the tracks that still echo. In the waters that hide treasures. In the fishing villages. And in the vast plains of wool. What do these stories show us? That Australia wasn't built solely by politicians or businessmen. It was built by the shoulders, calloused hands, and blood of these forgotten workers. And perhaps that's why hearing about them keeps us hooked until the end. Because deep down, it's the reminder that a country's greatness is born from the invisible sacrifice of its common people.